So we're going to be talking about three different styles of research today, and again, those are exploratory, descriptive, and causal. And I'm going to continue repeating them because I want you to really remember those terms. They're important. Before we begin talking about each of them individually, I want you to just kind of get a general understanding for what they are. So, generally, as I said, marketing research projects are divided into three different styles. And the first of those is exploratory, and exploratory research is really research that's intended to help give us fundamental information about a topic at hand. And fundamental may mean that we're starting from a point of knowing very little, and we need to make sure we understand a little bit more before we can conduct any further research. Fundamental might also mean that we're doing what we call a drill down, where we have general ideas about how a topic works, but we need to drill down and try to understand a little bit more deeply about what respondents are saying, or what opinions are showing, or sentiments are favoring. So exploratory research can be used in many different ways. We also have descriptive research, and descriptive research, I actually hate the way your textbook talks about descriptive research. The textbook, again, for those that are watching on the internet, is just called Marketing Research. It's by the authors Burns and Bush, and it's in its 7th edition. And in the textbook, they give, I think, a pretty confusing definition of what descriptive research is and how it's used. I want to summarize it by saying descriptive research is generally used to describe something in statistical terms, so using numbers, using statistics. And generally what we're describing is a population or a sample or a group of people and what they think or feel or how they behave from a quantitative point of view, so from a numerical quantity perspective rather than from a qualitative, what individuals think sort of perspective. The final type of research that we're going to talk about is causal research, and causal, not casual. A lot of students, when they first see that, get a little mixed up. I'm not actually sure what casual research is. Maybe it's research that's conducted, with a polo shirt unbuttoned in a lounge somewhere. But no, causal research. Causal research is all about cause and effect. And causal research is the style of research that most mimics a lot of scientific research that's done where we use experimental or pseudo-experimental designs. And there are different applications for that, such as test marketing and really advanced analytics, and we'll talk about some of those in our series today. Now, if you're hearing me describe these three different styles of research and thinking that maybe they should go in the order that I just presented, exploratory, then descriptive, then causal, you're not alone. A lot of people, when they hear about these types of research, think, okay, it makes sense. We can start with exploratory research and really begin to understand our topic, and then we can figure out what we want to know through descriptive research and do a nice big quantitative study, and then we can look and see if there are any cause and effect relationships that are suggested by that, and come back and really isolate those variables with a causal study. And that is an acceptable way to conduct a multi-stage research project, and in fact that's a common way to do things, but it's not the only way. I don't want to suggest that we always start with exploratory research and then move on to descriptive and then go on to causal, because it's not always how it works. There are times where we start off with a survey that's been done for a descriptive study, and then we need to go back and drill down with an exploratory study, and we don't care about causal research. There are other times where we have enough information on hand that we don't need to do anything other than causal research or descriptive research. There are times where maybe we need to do 2 or 3 descriptive studies before we can move on to any other forms. So there's no set order in how these styles of research are done. And really what you need to understand is that it's all about the type of information that you want to get and also the application of that information. So again, exploratory is what we use when we don't know a lot, or when we really want to know a lot of depth and detail about something. Descriptive is what we get when we want more general information and more generalizable information. Generalizable means that we can take something that we've learned about a group of people and extrapolate it out to a larger group. And then causal research is really, again, to understand cause and effect. It's really to test hypotheses in really structured ways. And I guess the best way to think about this is, let's say that there's a movie that you want to watch that you see on Netflix, okay? So you're on Netflix, there's a movie that you think, I might want to sink an hour or two into this. Let's go and look at the reviews. So a descriptive approach would be to go and just look for the scores that have been given and just kind of understand what's the average score, what's the high, what's the low. What kind of people tend to like this movie? That would be a descriptive approach. A more exploratory approach would be to go and actually read the reviews that people have written on this movie, and to try to understand what was it that they liked, what was it that they didn't like, does it line up with how I tend to watch movies? Like if you really like schlock movies and it turns out to be a schlock movie like Birdemic or something, or The Room or something like that, then it might not get very high review scores, but hey, the qualitative reviews that you're reading in a more exploratory fashion might tell you this is something I'm really going to enjoy. If you tend not to like chick flicks and it's a chick flick, it might have reviewed okay, but then you read the word chick flick and that exploratory process and you're like, no way, I don't want to watch that. At least not without a date. For a more causal type of application, you might want to actually review how people felt when they saw the movie. So what kind of feelings does this movie tend to elicit? And you might want to look at the other movies that they went on to watch afterwards. Netflix will often give recommendations about, if you like this, then try these out. And you might want to look more for a cause and effect. When people watch this movie, then they tend to move on to this action or this feeling or these kinds of movies. So all three of these applications, they're intuitive. They make sense. And they're just different ways of approaching information. As you're learning about each, please try to remember as well, I'm going to give you some general guidelines. For example, I'm going to talk about how exploratory research tends to be qualitative, but it can be quantitative. And likewise, descriptive research can start out in a qualitative setting and be turned into something that's more descriptive. So there are guidelines, but they're not rules. And it's important to remember that really, at the end of the day, what it's about is the type of data that you're collecting and what you're going to do with that data. That's what really defines exploratory, descriptive, and causal.